Greetings and welcome back to the Old Ways Rising Farm YouTube channel, where we're going to talk about this bag. Now, I want to give you a little backstory on this bag. I found this recently at a powwow where I was doing a flint knapping demonstration and had to pick it up. So a number of years ago I was flipping through a set of books. There's a series of books like sketchbooks of the fur trade, sketchbooks of the mountain man era, like sketchbooks of ... fill in blank. And I have a number of them. In one of those books I saw this really interesting, neat double pouch shoulder bag. Okay? And I even designed a version of my own to go on a belt, right? This one is designed as a belt bag. But at this powwow I found this on one of the tables, and it is a double pouch shoulder bag. So I had to get it and bring it home and look at how it's put together in detail. Okay, so it's a really nice piece. It's really good leather. It's really nice construction, and it's really easy to see how it's put together. So what I've done is I have taken this bag and drawn a set of plans, okay, so that I can share this bag with you very directly. Okay, these are up on our Patreon. It is in the digital store section, and yes, you can just buy the plans if you want. But I'd much rather build membership and build a community on the Patreon. So everybody who is a paid member at any tier, even $1 a month, which is the lowest tier Patreon will allow me to make, gets full free access to everything in the repository, and can just go and get them there and be part of the community. So this is an unsponsored, unmonetized YouTube channel, and I am most grateful for everybody who's already there. Hope that you will join. But even if you're not interested in that, come along with this video, because I'm going to talk you through how we look at, take apart. In this case, we didn't have to literally dissect it because I can see all of the seams, but comb over a piece like this, understand its history, when it was made, what it's made out of, what's really good, what could be done a little bit better and improved upon in future videos, and through doing that, draw your own plans so that you can make your own gear, because you can make better stuff than you can buy most of the time. So, plans are available, and in this video I'll talk about how I go over this and make the plans. Now, before we go and start, kind of doing a deep dive on construction and what I like and what I don't like and how we're going to go about doing this drawing, I just want to talk a little bit about materials and age. So this is definitely not old. Okay, it's not old. There's no cracking in the leather here, and it's sewed with a nylon thread of some sort. You can see here where they melted and burnt the ends in. Okay, so they melted the thread to keep it from fraying. And I mean, that's good. I'm not saying that as a criticism, but it definitely says that, it's a newer piece, right? They're using modern materials. Absolute dead giveaway. The material they used, I think, is almost, I like the weight here in the flap, and we'll talk more about how that flap's designed later on in this discussion. I think, though, overall, except for that being nice that it's stiff and heavy, I think the leather they chose for this is a little too stiff. I would have chosen something a little limper. Not massively so, but a little bit, because you can see how the seams are kind of puckering out. They're not really laying nicely. So I think that the way they sewed it and the material they used are a bit of a mismatch. Okay. Now, you can do a seam where you sew a piece of welting inside a stiff piece of leather and then sew your gusset to the welting, and then you use a very thin leather for that welting, and then it all lays together nice. But for a direct edge-to-edge attachment like that, I would have rather seen a lighter leather and maybe sew it inside out and turn it out for a hidden seam. But that's a choice. There's nothing wrong or bad about it, but I would have made a few different choices, in a few ways. So I think that it is some sort of Latigo leather. I don't know exactly what. It doesn't quite act like true. It doesn't act quite like true veg tan, but it definitely has some veg tan characteristics, right? They stamped it with a number there, 1689, and same out here. I don't know why or what. I don't think it has that much to do with the nature of the pouch. Could be some
brand thing,
or they were stamping out a whole bunch of parts and wanted to keep things together. I don't know. But it holds a stamp. And usually if you want something to hold a stamp, you're definitely talking about using veg tan. But it's got a different texture than most veg tan, which is why I think it's probably Latigo, which is a tanning process where they chrome tan it initially and then they come back and veg tan it as a second step. And you get characteristics halfway in between chrome tan soft garment leather and veg tan hard harness leather. So I think that's what this is. Thickness is about 2 millimeter. Okay, so that's a good thickness. But for something like this, I think using oil tan, which would just be softer all the way around for the body of it, and then put veg tan pieces in where you need the weight. Or if you want to use this thick leather all the way around, then you could go and just use something like an oil tan for these gussets. So then they will fold. And if you do that, it will fold selectively. So you would get this front panel dead flat, and all of the flexing will happen in the thinner leather. Mm-hmm. Okay, so if you did that and used two different thicknesses of leather, two different weights of leather, or two different tanning processes, right? You could do, if you wanted to tool this and really decorate it all the way up, you could use veg tan for all of these, these three big outer pieces, and then a really soft leather for the gussets, and the seams would lay really, really nice. Okay, if you did that. So I don't say that as a criticism, but I do say that as, they're always look at your pieces and think, how can I do that better next time? Right? If it's something you made, think, how could I do that better next time? And if it's something you're, pulling a pattern from that somebody else made, also think, how could I do that better next time? Right? So those are some things, about material choice that I would change. I like thong lacing when I'm doing my leather work, so I'll probably make mine that way. But there's absolutely nothing wrong with the stitching. It's good thread. I'm not putting any criticism there. I'm just noting things. The other way that you can really tell that it's modern is I can see Sharpie marker in a couple places where they were marking out their pattern. So, right. This was made in the era where we had Sharpie markers and plastic thread, right? That's why I like to do things in pencil, because it rubs off over time. You'll see it for a little while, but it rubs off. The other thing that might be nice if you really wanted to do this and make it last a little bit longer would be in some of these areas where you have a lot of hinging, you could sew in a piece of webbing like this to reinforce some of those hinge spots, because leather likes to crack where it bends regularly. So, and we'll talk about dressing this and helping extend the life of this piece here in a different video. Now, before we take a pattern off of anything, the first thing we want to do is just really examine it, see how it's put together, and decide what elements we want to draw and what we don't, or what we know we want to change. Now, this one, I am going to draw pretty much as it exists in this condition. There are some things that I want to change, but I'm not going to put them in this drawing because I will prototype them and then, post-prototyping, make alterations and update the pattern. So for now, we're just going to take a pattern directly from this. as authentically as we can, as authentically as it makes sense to, I will say. So the first thing is, do I need to take any of it apart in order to see all the pieces? And the answer to that question in this one is no. So if you look at how it's made, the flap, the front flap, and the back are one piece, right? So this goes all the way over and becomes the front flap, okay, with this sort of beaver tail closure. Now, if we look at the inside, and I turn it all the way up like this, you can see this is also one single piece of leather, right? So the majority of the construction is just two large cuts of leather, and then all of the other little stuff is added in. Now there are several other smaller pieces and units. If we look at the front pouch, well, the back of it is part of this inner main piece. We do need a third larger cut to finish off the pouch. The back pouch, we won't. Okay, so the front of the back pouch is the back side of this main inner flap. And then the back of the back pouch is the piece which is connected here to the closure. This front pouch, we have a small inset piece, and which makes a little inner pocket. Not sure how else it's going to show a shadow, but it makes a little inner pocket there. Okay. Now, in order of operations, when you're assembling one of these, you would want to sew that, okay, before you assemble the whole pouch. Okay, right? So you would want to do all of these little pieces first. And then if we look at the back pouch, we have a sub pocket, I'll call it, like a little inner pocket here. And then we have a second one on the back. Okay? And you can see the seam line from that if I flip it over. Okay? So we will need a small piece here and then three smaller pieces for those inner pockets, if you want to make them authentically or true to the original pouch as it's currently sitting. That's one of the things that I will probably change when I make my own. So I like the idea in a hunting pouch of having a couple of special use pockets like that, but I would make them specific to some use. Okay? So this front pocket, it would be really nice to have a pocket for a compass, which just fits and sets in this piece. That would be a really nice thing to have. But again, you would need to have the compass in your hand and then size the pocket to your compass. It would be nice to have a ferro rod pouch so that you always have a ferro rod here. It would be nice to have a pouch for like a little tinder kit, or like for a little char cloth tin, something like that, so that you have a little fire kit which is always there, has its dedicated place, and is isolated in one of these little pockets in such a way that you're not fiddling and fumbling for it as you're rooting through your pouch, right? It's because those things fall to the bottom. Whereas, like, I wouldn't do a specialized pouch for a sewing kit or something like that because, you know, if you have time to sit and stitch, it's not an emergency. You know, just by definition, right? So I like having some of these inner pouches, but in my vision of how I would make this for myself, they would be different inner pouches. So for this drawing, I'm going to draw these as they are, but don't think that you need to be, you know, slavish in your following of this pattern, right? Make these to your use. If you're making this for a black powder hunting kit, you might want to make some pouches for like some quick loaders. You know, so if you have some plastic quick loaders, or, you know, a ball starter, you might want to make a pouch in the front just for those things, or, you know, like your little pan primer, you know, so those things that you'd want to get quickly. You took a shot at a deer You know it's going down, but you want to reload in case it's going to need a second shot, right? So some of those things you might want to make specialized pouches for if that's your purpose for making this bag. So, you can customize it and do those things, but it doesn't make sense for me to draw those customizations and then put them in this drawing, because you'll need to make those sized to your own equipment that you're going to put in them. If I make a pouch for a compass that fits a compass I have, that might not fit your compass, right? You'd want to redo that. So, I will draw this as is, but feel free to adjust that. Then we're going to need 2 of these side gussets, and if you look at these, they're widest at the bottom, right? So what are we at? We're at about 4 centimeters there, and then at the top we're at about 1 centimeter. Okay, so there's a taper in that side gusset. Okay, so we will need to reproduce that taper, and we'll talk about doing that by measurement. We'll need those pieces. This cute little turtle on the front is that's a detail that you can do or not. There isn't a good way to reproduce the turtle art, but I'll make sure I take a photograph of it and include that in these drawings. It's cute, yeah. I'll take a photograph of it like nice and square on and include that in these drawings. So, if you want the turtle, you can make the turtle, but you could do any little decorative piece that you want there. And what they've done in this original is they have made a second piece identical to the front flap, cut out the turtle in the front flap, and then sandwiched a piece of felt, okay, and just sewed it all together, right? So that's optional. I do like, just as we're analyzing this, I do like the added weight. Okay, so since there isn't a locking closure of any sort on this, I like having the extra weight of that flap. It's real hefty. So doubling that up adds to the weight, and we're depending on gravity to hold this down. So, I mean, we don't want to get it obscene with how heavy this is, because you're going to have to carry that weight on your shoulder all day. But having a little extra heft in there is a very nice feature of this bag. The last thing design-wise I want to talk about is how they attached the strap. Now, I don't really like this strap. It's just, in my opinion, like, this buckle system is needlessly bulky. I do like having the strap being cloth rather than leather. Okay? Because leather will stretch into form more than cloth. And leather will crack whenever it bends. So a cloth webbing like this will be a longer lasting item than a leather strap. Now, if I were doing it, I would like to see some soft leather and padding up here over the shoulder so it's a little thicker, especially if you're going to use this as a hunting pouch with a bunch of lead balls in there. That would have been nice to thicken this up a little bit. That, to add a little bit of leather there, that's good. And I do like that they sewed it to leather keepers right where it goes into the ring. Okay, cloth will last longer when it's being bent and flexed a lot. However, leather is more abrasion resistant. So if you put cloth right to here, it would just bunch up, and you'd end up with just, instead of the full width of your ring, you just have a little bunch there. And it will wear through and fray more quickly than the leather will wear through. So I like the construction, how they have pieced together the right material in the right location. And I like that they have sewn on keepers instead of just putting some sort of grommet hole in there. So having this external keeper sewed to the outside is a very good way to build a pouch like this. It's going to take heavy wear, because this is a wear point. this is one of the first places that it will fail. And because this is one of the first places that it will fail, you want to design it in a way that's easy to fix. So if at any point, or I should say when, inevitably, these pieces wear out, these stitchings can be cut and new ones can be sewn on. So I like that. I like this design. I wish it was a little beefier right here. And I don't know what's going on with this big belt buckle. It's just kind of weird. So, but that's just a choice, right? You can make whatever choice you want. You can buy whatever belt buckle you want for something like this. That's all on you, right? That's not intrinsic to the design and construction of the pouch. Now, the thing that I'm not going to draw for sure is I'm not going to draw this sheath. I will talk about here how it's made. It is just one piece with an outline of the knife that went in it. I don't have the knife that went in it. And it is welted, so there's a double layer right there, which is good. So it's a well-made sheath, but unless you have a knife that is exactly fitting in that sheath, it's useless. So if you're making this for yourself, you absolutely could put a sheath here. You would again want to do that before you sew the whole thing up. But I don't see a whole lot of point in, drawing, taking a whole lot of time to draw and try to reproduce this sheath when we don't even know what knife went in it. And it's not really going to do you any good. So I'm going to omit the sheath from this drawing. I will draw the rest of it faithfully. And the nice thing about this is that since we can see these stitch lines, okay, we have the ability to, very accurately measure this, take off measurements, so we don't have to pull the pack apart and trace everything. And that's really nice. So, I'm going to go get set up to start drawing, and we'll talk about pulling measurements one bit at a time and making a set of drawings and patterns from which you can reproduce this or your derivative of this. We don't need a whole bunch of tools to draw this, but we do need a couple things. Obviously, we need some paper. Now, because I want this to be easy for all y'all to print out on your own later on, I'm doing this directly on 8.5 by 11. When I'm doing things like this for myself, I like larger sketchbooks because I can draw larger things and put more things on one page. But since I intend to scan this drawing and provide it on our Patreon, I'm going to do it directly on 8.5 by 11 pages. And where I need larger than 8.5 by 11 pages, I just have two taped together. So you just get a little bit of your Christmas wrapping tape out and just a couple little pieces. And then at the end of the day, when it's all done, we will cut those apart. Okay? So for drawing tools, draw everything initially in pencil. And then we will decide what lines we end up keeping and which lines we end up getting rid of. And the lines we end up keeping, we will then go over with fine tip Sharpie. And after having gone over it with fine tip Sharpie, then you're going to want a big eraser to erase the rest of the pencil, and the Sharpie will remain. That's a really nice way to do this. And again, since I intend to scan it, I want a very dark line. Okay. If we need it, I have a big Sharpie here. I don't know if we'll do anything with that or not. But we need a ruler, and we need a cloth ruler. Whenever we're measuring around a curved surface, you don't want to try to... I mean, yeah, you can sort of kind of bend this and keep going, right? Kind of do one of these games, but it's never very accurate. And, carpenter's tape measures are not flexible enough to go over a sharp radius. Okay? So we want a cloth ruler. The problem with these is there's an inaccuracy in the end piece. Okay? but it's not that bad. And we do have both imperial and metric on this one, which is nice. And then when we get into drawing curves, yes, theoretically, you could just take, the tip of your pencil and trace around this. But can you hear that? Right? It's not going to be even. And it's very hard to get the tip properly lined up with, because you don't want to run it around there. I'm making, a systematic error of, 3/16 or so wider than the piece in every direction. Okay? And it's relatively irregular because of the stitching. Okay? And when a piece like this is cut out by hand, it's never perfectly symmetrical. Okay? So if I were to trace it on this side and then flip it over and trace it on the other side, they won't match. They never will. Okay? Now, that's not a bad... This is not the end of the world in a finished product. And if I do have something where I just have to trace it for whatever reason, I will usually do that, trace one side, trace the other side, and then eyeball the middle of those two tracings. Okay, and take that for the real one. Or if I have reason to believe that there's humps and valleys in certain places, then you could either only cut to the outside or only cut to the inside line, depending on which you think you need to favor. But what's better is to have some of these drawing tools. So I have two different stencils for circles. Okay. I have an ellipse stencil, and these are called French curves. Okay. And they're just a curve stencil with a lot of different curves on it, so you can get in and make a couple reference points, and then just find a place. Let's say I have those 3 reference points, and then you can just find a place where the curve, right there it is, matches and hits those 3 reference points, and then consistently draw an even shape around a proper, not straight edge because it ain't straight obviously, but tracing edge, right? Where you can eliminate that positive bias of trying to do this with a pencil, and you eliminate the irregularities. So what we'll do as we get into this, and I'll show you this, is we'll start matching curves to stencils and then using the proper stencil to draw it. Now, also, because of symmetry, when I draw this, I'm going to draw a half pattern. Okay? And then when you go to use it, you can mark the center line of your piece, trace it one direction, flip it over, and then trace it the other direction. Okay? So when you have a curved, when you have something like this where literally everything is curved, it's better to do it that way, to only draw half of the pattern. Okay? You'll get a more accurate piece. So let's start. The first thing we want to do is get a rectangle that will show how big we need to make this. And this is, at its widest point, it tapers a little to the top, and then it tapers out again at the bottom. So we just need to find what is the widest measurement. And that is, okay, there's 21.5 across the top. 20.5. And then I flatten that out. That's 20.5, but it's dipping in, so I don't totally trust that as much as this first one. Okay, and again, notice that, right? This is 21.5 across there. But when I measure here with all of these dips and curves, it only comes out 20.5. So I'm assuming that this is well, we know it's lost distance, right? We know it's lost some dimension there to the curve. So we're going to go with this also being 21.5 centimeters. Okay. So that's the first thing, and I'm just going to put a mark here. But remember, we're doing a half pattern. So 21.5, half of that is 10 3/4. So we want to make a mark. Then make a mark. Okay, now we need our maximum length. So if I fold this out, kind of try to get this pressed down as much as possible. And you know, it doesn't have to be, if we lose a 1/4 inch or gain a 1/2 inch somewhere, it's not a big a deal as long as it's internally consistent. And now, try to go with the curves and the folds as best as possible. 17.5 inches. Okay. Stuff's getting caught on stuff. Set all that over there. Where'd my yardstick go? There's my yardstick. So 17.5 inches. Is right here. Put a little mark, and then we're just going to lightly trace a line. Okay. Now, reference point by reference point, we're going to work our way in on this lid. So, set that down. Working from here to the top. If remember, we lost 1 centimeter. Okay. So if I put this in the middle there, how far back is that? Okay. 9.5 inches is our narrowest point. So let me grab this. My drawing square went AWOL somewhere, which is why I'm doing this with 2 measurements instead of just putting a square on it. Okay, we're going to mark that. And then I'm just going to measure down, because we lost 1 centimeter in total length. So I'm going to measure down 1/2 centimeter. You have to remember, everything is half. So if we want to lose 1 total, we will lose half from this side. Okay. And then that will be a line up, but I need to know where my maximum width is. So I'm just going to use this as a straight edge. Maximum width is about there and there. Okay. And then we'll take this, the cloth tape, and measure from there to the point. That's 5 3/4. Okay. So 5 3/4. I only need a mark here. Okay. So that's our maximum width. that line will end up being kept and markered in, whereas all the rest of this is going to get erased at the end of the day. Okay. Now, we need to do the same thing and start looking at this tab. So this is, you need to make some reference points. Again, to a certain extent, you kind of have to eyeball some of this. So I can use the straight edge, and I'm trying to eyeball where it really contracts. So that's 2 5/8 there, 3, 3.5. Okay. So that's a convenient place to look at this. So we're 3 inches wide, 2 1/4 inches deep, and it's about, that's a 2.5 inch radius. Okay, so 2 1/4 inches deep. Put a mark. That's 3 inches wide. Half of that's 1.5 inches. Just going to put a mark right there. That's going to be kind of a mark on our grid. Okay. Now, since measuring this, that's about a 2.5 inch circle. Let me find. This is a 2.5 inch circle. Is that correct? Does that fit? Yes, that fits very nicely. So now when you're using these stencils, you have these marks on them which are showing top, bottom, left, and right. And those are basically like, marks on a compass rose. So we can come, we're only going to draw half of it, because again, we're doing half of everything. Okay. And now I'm only going to draw 1/4 of this. So from where it meets at the tip to this middle section, that's going to come from the circle. And it's going to ascend to there. Let's get another mark. So if I come down here, it is 6 inches wide. 4 inches from the end. Same thing. So again, if I come back 4 inches, and then I measure up 3 inches. So there's another point. Then okay, so that's 7 inches. Four and a half inches deep. So 4.5 inches deep. And we'll measure 3.5. And obviously this is one of our points. This is one of our points. Okay. Now the curve wants to be belly down. So this is where we go to our French curve. And it kind of comes in and then goes out. So I'm going to take these 3 points and use it belly down. And then these 3 points use it belly up. And there we have a nice curve going off to here. So that completes the first part of this, except for one thing, and that's I want to know where this seam is for stiffening that front, and that is 7 3/4 inch from the end. So 7 3/4 inch. Here. Make 2 little marks. I'm just going to draw a dotted line. To note where that seam is. So when you're printing this pattern, you would want to, mark the whole thing, flip it over and then mark the whole thing to cut your main flap, and then do it again to get this piece to sew in as that insert. And take it from the same pattern. Because again, every time you copy the pattern, you're going to introduce an error. Okay? So the better a job, using it, printing it, cutting it out, tracing it 4 times is better than making separate patterns and then trying to get them to line up after the fact. So, there. Now we need to do the back of it. And so now my first question is this bottom radiused or straight? Just look at that with the straight edge, and it is radiused. Okay. Fairly gently. Do I have a radius on my French curve that's going to line up with that? Ha! Okay, so this is kind of fun. This is exactly that radius. It's not uncommon to find this when you start studying old furniture and craft items like this. So these French curve sets have been used and sold for a very, very long time. These are the same curves that they were using to make Victorian gingerbread on houses, right? So these are the same curve profiles. Now, I mean, back in the Victorian times, they weren't using, nice little plastic ones like this, but they had curve sets for laying these things out. So when they measured the radius on the back of this bag, they used this radius. So this gets real easy, real quick. Okay, I want to mark 17.5 here on the bottom edge. Double check my measurements. We always want to measure twice so we don't have to say, gosh golly gee whizzikers, I wish it didn't go that way. And now remember, this is the outside. So I'm going to make a starting line. Hang on, I'm getting ahead of myself here a little bit. I do need to take a measurement from this top down to this side. 8 inches. Okay. So if I come in 8 inches, okay, good, that agrees. So we're just going to draw, that's our minimum point, that's the top of this. And that's a good check, right? I did all of this working from the front to that is the minimum measurement, and then measured it from the back as well, and it matches. Okay? So that's a good thing. So I'm going to draw this line. Then I'm going to, I need to draw this line just as a reference point. Then, so we know this is the bottom edge. And that little, there's a little mark on it there, which is the maximum extent on the end of that. I'm just going to line those two things up so that it touches this point and that line. Okay, so there's our bottom radius. Now, look at how smooth and clean this is versus if I was trying to trace around this, you know, kind of. Mangled is the wrong word, right? It's not mangled, but it's contoured with use wear, right? We'll put it that way, contoured with use wear. So, you know, if I was trying to trace this, that would be a nightmare. But when we know something about how these things are made, and we have some of these tools, and none of these are expensive, like a set of these stencils, and I have 3 sets of stencils here, and they were probably like $2 or $3 each set. You know, so it's, you can get these for very little money. And they help a lot and give us a nice, clean tracing. So here's what it looks like with all of those guidelines erased and a little bit of annotation. We'll get more annotation on this, but I've done these before where I did a lot of annotation early on and then ended up at the end stages needing to draw a line where I'd written something and then I was sad and had to do it again. So, right. Edge of flat reinforcement, that's this. Okay. I will somewhere here note the seam allowances on this, but I'm not going to draw seam lines, right? Because they'll just kind of fall where they fall. So here's the finished pattern with all of the extraneous lines erased and everything darkened in pen so that it's permanent and that it will scan well. I've also put the annotation on here, instructions, a note that everything in this pattern is to be mirrored, and that will continue because there isn't a single piece in here that has really a straight line anywhere. It's all curved. So, you know, again, when you want symmetrical curved pieces, you draw half of it and mirror it when you trace your pattern. I always, when I do a tape pattern like this, I always like to put arrows in to, you know, indicate where it's being joined. In this pattern, all of the other pieces that we're going to mark can fit on a single page of paper. So we won't need any more taped together patterns. But if I have more than one set of taped together pattern, every line I add arrows. Right, so if there was a second one, I would put 2 arrows on the join, and then a third one, put 3 arrows on the join. Fourth one, maybe like 2 arrows here and 1 arrow here, right? Just so that it's very distinct and easy to tell which page goes to which page. Because there's a tendency to print papers, forget about them, lose them in stacks of other paper, refind them, and get them mixed up one page from the next, right? So I always have page numbers on them, and wherever there's a join line, have an obviously non-identical pattern of those arrows in it. Okay, that won't be important here because we only have one. Then I'll very carefully cut this tape by scoring it with the knife. I'm not putting any pressure on there, so I don't need a cutting board, and page 1, page 2. So there's the start of our pattern. Beloved, can you set that somewhere safe? Now, the next thing that we want to look at with this are these little inset pockets. Like I said, I'm going to draw these. They're going to be mirrored, just like before, and I'm going to draw them just as they appear here. So, again, we're going to draw 1/2 of it because we have a curve here and a curve there. Okay? So, just like before, we're going to find our basic dimensions. Okay. And we will note on these, when we get into the annotation, we will note how far these are from the top of the panel. Okay. And they're all centered, right? This one's centered. All of these pieces. This one is centered. These are obviously different, but we'll get to that in the third stage of this. So we'll do these. Front panel. It's going to be just like before. Only this time I can't see the piece, so we're going to just trace this line and then move out from that for a seam allowance. Okay? And the seam allowance, I measured that off camera. On this is a pretty consistent 8 millimeter or 5/16 inch. So we'll draw what we can see and then add 8 millimeter for the final piece that we'll cut out. Okay? So, taking some measurements. Again, I need something to measure with and something to be a straight edge. Mark across those first 2 stitches. It is 3.5 inches deep and 3 3/4 wide there, 3 3/4 wide there. Okay, so we'll start right on the corner. We'll draw the depth, 3.5 inch. And then 3 3/4. One of those is off. Which of those is off? First one's off. There we go. 3 3/4. Half of that is 1 7/8. So there's that mark. Okay. I care more about the corners so that I can line up where the curves are going to fall than I do about the middle of these lines. So since I know I'm going to be erasing a lot of things, I'm just going to go ahead and only draw what I'm going to care about. And I'm extending this 8 millimeter. Again, just drawing some reference points. Okay. Now, just like before, we're going to get out our drawing tools. And I'm thinking probably the ellipse stencils are going to be pretty useful for this. And let's see if we can find something really. No, it's still a little flatter. I don't have an ellipse flat enough. That's a little too flat. Ta-da! Right there. Okay? So this right in the middle is that radius. Okay? So let me find my center point here. then just going to kind of eyeball this for even. Shame on me. I just did that upside down. That's okay. That's okay. Yeah, so we just connect the two corners. It's a line that gets erased, so it's not a big deal. And then I'm going to go ahead and draw this outer as well. Okay. And then, is the bottom the same curve? No, the bottom's a lot steeper. That might fit with this ellipse. Yes. Basically perfectly does. With this flattest ellipse there. So, we need to find a center line so that we can use our stencil. Okay, 5.5. Off a little bit. Okay. Now this one extends out. Here around the corners, we're just going to kind of eyeball a bit of a radius there. And that's totally fair to do. Okay. So now, on the inside, I am going to mark this with a dashed line, and then I'll annotate that's the seam line. And then this outer piece, just going to freehand. Carried away with dotted lines there for a second. This curve. So that I can flow into that curved corner a little bit easier. Okay. And then we find the eraser in the pile of stuff. There it is. And we remove all the junk we don't care about. Okay. So we need to note that this is the top. This is the mirror line right there. And then we'll add some other annotation to this. But again, I'm going to work my way around and try to get all of these on the same piece of paper, and then use the empty space to draw arrows and indicate and say where all of the things are. So I'm going to do those other two, this inset and this one, and it's just going to be exactly the same as I did here. Here's the finished pattern for the inner pocket pieces. And these are just simple cutouts. I did draw a seam line on these, in no small part because I'm starting from the seam line, right? So that's all good. Not much to it. I do want to just show again, it's interesting, like, get these. If you're going to do this kind of stuff, get a set of these. Collect them. You find a new shape that you don't have, get it. You won't regret that. Because look at just how perfectly these fit, right? From that direction, and then from that direction, right? So, you know, when I drew this pocket, I drew it here and all the way around, and then came back this way, there and all the way around, and then just where they met, kept that line. Right? So they're really wonderful things, and you'll discover if you start looking at common shapes, common design goods, and you have one of these and you start holding it up to things, you'll figure out that pretty much everybody has used these forever. Okay? These, and then, you know, the standard ellipses. And I want to get some more standard ellipse stencils in larger sizes here at some point too. You know, you will just find, you'll find those basic shapes in so many places. A lot of them are based on natural common geometries, and then also, right, like, you know, golden mean curves and things like that. Right? You'll find them everywhere. So all we need to do yet is we need to do these leaf-shaped keepers, and we need to do this piece. Can you set this with the others, beloved? So I'm going to do this side strap here real quick, just because it's so easy. Okay? And we need to get too much stuff on my bench. Too much stuff on my bench. Thank you, beloved. Do any of you have that problems? Too much stuff on your bench?
It's only just a you problem, I guess.
That's just a me problem. It
No.
could just be a me problem. Definitely is a me problem. Okay, so this is the value of these tapes. A flexible tape, because I can go around that curve. 20.5 inches. Okay? So, again, I want to try to keep this on one piece of paper. So we're just going to draw half of it. Okay? So I'm just going to start. I'm going to give myself a little bit of a margin on this one because I can. Just come an inch down. Come an inch down. And then we're going to want to come over 10.25. Draw that line in. Most of that's going to end up getting erased. And now we need to find the widest portion. I'm going to stretch that out. Is this in view, beloved?
No.
No. Okay, let me move it.
That's in you.
Okay. So I'm going to stretch that out. And at its widest, it's just a little strong of 1.5 inches. I suspect that probably was originally 1.5 inches, and it's just stretched a little bit. Okay. So, at the back, we're going to be 1.5 inches. Okay. Now what is it at its narrowest? I can measure it without knocking everything around. Is this in view?
Yes.
That one's going to be hard to get down to. Okay. And flatten the top piece there. And that is 3/8. Okay. So I will find the middle here. I'm doing that in the wrong end. I guess it doesn't really matter. Find the middle, which is going to be 3/4 inches. Now I want to go 3/16 on either side. 3/16 is half of 3/8. Draw that line in. Now let's play a little bit of connect the dots. And I know this is going to be a final line, so I'm just going to go right ahead with the pen. Just try not to draw over the dog holes in the workbench here. Choosing to do this on top of a messy old workbench might not have been the best plan. It's not like they make drafting tables for this or anything. Draw the back.
You need to make you one of those.
Oh, it's a planned project. The design's half in my head, but they're not on paper yet. Okay, so that's that shape. And then here, this is going to be the mirrored edge. Okay, and then this will be the top. And I'm not going to write anything more than that because, again, saving space on the paper, I might want to put something somewhere else. So, easy peasy. That one's really simple. Now, we need to get these. These are going to be a little bit trickier, okay? Because we have this curve in it. So that is about 3 inches even. And then I have to kind of tuck that in there. Keep it tucked. It's 1.5 around that radius. Okay? So that it's 1.5 around that radius. Since I'm going to draw this mirrored in 2 directions this time, okay, I'm going to carry through 3/4 of an inch of that. So it's going to be 3 3/4 inch. Again, I'm going to give myself a margin. So I know I'm going to have plenty of room on this, so I'm just going to give myself a big old beefy 1-inch margin there. Okay, then this will be that edge, and this will be the center line of that leaf shape. Okay, so now what do we say? 3 3/4. Okay, so that's going to be the tip. The next measurement I need is inside of this. And again, that's curved, so we want to go with the curve. That's an even inch, which makes sense. Again, you'll also find with these things, if you're looking at a bag that was made in a metric country during a metric time, you'll find it's coming out to even centimeter and half centimeter increments. And if you're looking at a bag that was made in imperial units country and imperial units time, it's going to come out even inches, right? Typically. Because there isn't a certain size that a bag has to be. If this was an inch bigger in any direction, it would be fine. If it was an inch smaller in any direction, it would be fine. So people are picking convenient sizes for the materials they have to work with, right? I mean, obviously you don't want a shoulder bag the size of a suitcase. There's a limit to this. But within the realm of reasonable, it doesn't matter if it's an inch bigger or an inch smaller. People are just picking what they like, and they're thinking, oh, well, 6 inches by 8 inches is a reasonable thing, or 10 centimeters by 20 centimeters is a reasonable thing. So you usually find, just like all of these curves are coming out to curves that I have on my drawing curves, because the person who drafted this in the first place probably had the same set of drawing curves, even if it was 100 years ago, which it wasn't because it's plastic thread. But, you're going to find that this stuff lines up. And that turns out to be really important information, because if you're having difficulty getting one of these measurements and it's close to an even increment, it probably was originally the even increment and is just stretched out a bit. Okay? So since this is mirrored, we're going to come up a ½ inch. Okay, now we know we're going to taper to a point. I need to know what the widest dimension is. It's 1 3/4 inches there, 1.5 inches there, 1 3/4 inches. Okay, so 1 3/4 inches right here is my widest measurement. And then if I just kind of eyeball where that is, about 2 inches from the tip, it's 1 3/4 inches wide. Oops, sorry, folks, didn't mean to bump the camera. There's 2 inches. And now if you're having trouble mental mathing these things, just do 2 smaller problems. So it's 1 3/4 inches. Half of an inch is a ½ inch. Half of 3/4 is 3/8. So I can just come up a ½ inch and then 3 more eighths. And there's my mark. So, basic mental math rules. If you're having trouble doing mental math on a certain thing, or, you're talking for a video and can't quite focus on your math perfectly, you can do 2 smaller problems. Now let's see if I can find that curve in one of my French curves. Ha! Guess what? Right there it is.
Perfect.
Right there it is. I'm just going to stick and it ends right at this inner curve. So this is a reference point. Probably they had this exact same curve and use the same reference point. So that reference point at the edge, come around to the tip. Okay? So that reference point right at the edge. And come around to the tip. And there's our leaf shape. Now I am going to, I'll just measure that and state what the, no, I'm going to draw this seam because that is important right there. Now you notice that this line kind of came up above my measurement. Oh, there's why. I'm a dingus. Double check yourself, right? I had a mark here at 1 inch, but I'm supposed to be coming off the ½ inch. So let me correct myself. It's also why we do it in pencil first.
Mm-hmm.
See how perfect that is? Now, if that wasn't perfect right there, whenever you're doing something like this, a fair line beats a measured value 10 out of 10 times. It's a rule from boat building. If your table of offsets gives you a measure, and you measure that, but then one of those is off of the fair curve, you go with the fair curve. Okay? Otherwise, you'll have a lumpy boat. Same thing here, right? If you know this curve is that curve, if that was off a little bit, it's because I measured wrong, right? Now, when I went back and checked, because that's like way off, right? It's like, oh, I drew that from the wrong line. That's okay. Nobody saw anything. We weren't recording that. Just a reminder myself. Okay. So I am going to come back and I'm going to draw in the sew line, because this right here and how that relates to the ring is important. Okay. So I'm going to draw that in. And I'm going to do exactly the same thing on this larger leaf shape, and then we'll look at the finished pattern. We have finished our pattern. So just to kind of review here a little bit, here are the first 2 pages. Join there, mirror and cut out. Okay. Here's the second page where we did all of these internal pockets. Here's the third page where we have the side gussets, and then pull this over, the connector straps and the side gussets there. And then I went ahead and did a 4th page with the belt buckle things. Okay, so if you like the look of having, the big bougie belt buckle, you have these connectors, this exact strap and that exact connector, which matches those. Okay, and still all of these curves on all of these things were from this section of this French curve, which is interesting. Now, there's one last thing I want to look at here with you, and that's, I left this undone deliberately. So this is the belt buckle holder curved line. Okay, we need to draw that sewing line. It can be a little tricky to get a constant, is this in view? Mm-hmm. View well? Okay. It can be a little tricky to get a constant distance when we're trying to trace the inside of a curve. And what we want to do to measure away and have a constant space between this curve and the curve I'm going to draw, okay, you need to measure that distance, and our seam line is still 8 millimeters. You want to measure that 8 millimeters along a line perpendicular to the tangent of the curve at that location. Now that was a lot of math words. So the tangent to a circle, okay, circle. The tangent is a line right across the circle, okay? So if this is the, this is the equator of the circle, right? This is easy to think of on a circle. The tangent line is perpendicular to the equator, okay? And then on a circle, that moves evenly. So this tangent line is perpendicular to that equator. Okay? Mm-hmm. To approximate that, okay, at some point here, if I want to measure away from the line right at where my finger is, take your ruler, take one of the big long marks, okay, and position that on the curve so that as I look straight down over it, this line seems to be going in a straight line with what's to follow, and then measure down. Because the edge is perpendicular to that inch mark. Ish. Not 100%, but, we're not Pythagoras here to worship these numbers. We're just trying to get close enough to know where to put some darn stitches. And it's plenty close enough to put some darn stitches. Then we come up, okay, so then, here, this line keeps going straight for that section, so I could measure down and put a mark there. If I want to do it here, okay, right there seems to be going straight and even with the rest of the curve, measure down and put my mark there. Okay, now that doesn't have millimeter marks, so I'm just going to do it here. So if I start here, it's right there, there's 8, come over a little bit. See how I'm changing the pitch of the ruler each time? Mm-hmm. So that this centimeter line keeps going straight with the next little section. There's 8. Here. That's where we'll go off the page. So you see, I now have these dots, and you see how they're nice, even curve, similar to the starting curve. Okay? And, if we just, look at the angle here at the end, it was about there. I'm just going to put my pencil here. And then up here, it was there, right? So you can see how different these angles are, because the curve changes. The slope of the curve changes with the curve. Okay? So, from here, I'm just going to eyeball a dashed line, connecting the dots, which also is not perfect, but remember, we're not building a spacecraft, we're sewing a bag. So there's our cut line, and here's our sew line. Just mirrored on this edge and mirrored on this edge to make this make that kind of folded leaf shape that is used in this bag. So that is the finished thing. This is going to go get scanned and go up along with a nice set of photographs of the starting bag for context. If you're interested in this pattern, it's going to be available for just outright purchase from our Patreon digital stuff store. And if you're a Patreon member, you get access to the entire digital repository for free. All of the paid members at any tier get that. So, I hope that you found this interesting. Now, on one hand, it's about a bag. But in the broader context, it's about replicating patterns. So, if you want to make stuff, you just got to kind of, you can go out and buy patterns. You can make up your own patterns from scratch, like I did with the belt version of the double pocket bag. Okay? But you kind of need inspiration a lot of the time, and finding these things, and when you pick stuff up and say, oh, that's a cool bag, right? I was walking around the vendors at a powwow, I was demonstrating flint knapping, I said, oh, that's a cool bag. Went and made a nice long knife. It's one of the nicest flint blades I've actually made in quite a long time, and traded him for that blade. Brought this home, took a pattern from it, and now you can have that pattern as well. So, you keep your eyes out for stuff, and keep your cell phone camera handy as well. So, we'll talk at some point here about making patterns from a photograph. So if you see stuff at one of your friends' places, you can say, hey, that's a cool bag. I want to make one. Can I take some photos of it? Right? And then if you take photos in a particular way, they will help you draw patterns like this. So just kind of keep your eyes open, keep your eyes peeled, find these things, and you will be able to get access to a lot of ideas to make your own stuff. And you can make better stuff than you can buy most of the time. Now, this is a very well-made bag. I don't say that to throw any shade at this in particular. This is better made and will last longer than a lot of the junk that you can buy out there, right? Because this is not junk. This is well-made, well-stitched from very, very high-quality, durable materials. And if it's cleaned up and oiled nice and taken care of, which is going to be another video that we do soon, this should last generations, a generation or two. Leather degrades. Leather gets red rot after a long enough period of time, but it should last a good long time. So keep this in mind, right? Follow this process, and you can draw your own plans and patterns from just about anything. You make a couple of things. You learn the construction methods. You learn what you like and what you don't like and how the materials interact with each other. And then you'll discover that, you get the thing, you get a pattern from the thing, and then you're making your own tweaks and changes, and what you actually make is yours. And now you've made something better than anything you could buy, and it's exactly what you want. So make friends with these skills, learn these skills, learn how to do these things, and you'll have a much nicer stuff, much more durable stuff for a whole lot less money than playing the consumer economy game. So, hope you found this interesting. If you're interested in this set of plans in particular for your own inspiration, go check out our Patreon. But either way, I hope that you join us here next time at Old Ways Rising Farm.